I have some more music-related videos that I'm very anxious to post on my channel, but I feel it will be spectacularly tone-deaf if I didn't first talk about what's going on in our country right now. I wanted to take some time to give you my thoughts and let you know where I stand and what I think. I've listened to a lot of very smart and very angry people lately. I have been especially moved by Trevor Noah, Amber Ruffin, Leslie Jones, and Wanda Sykes. But there aren't any stories about racism and abuse that aren't emotional to hear. It's very important for us all to listen right now and continue to increase our understanding of each other as much as we might want to speak our own truths and express our feelings. I don't want to ramble, so here are the main points that I've been thinking about. Number 1, maintain the outrage. The recent protests have shown how many people truly care about racism and police brutality all over the world. And thankfully, with the arrests, suspensions, and public outcry against the people who have clearly committed crimes, some progress has been made. But this is only the beginning. There is so much more to be done, and we cannot do it without maintaining this urgency. The long list of names of black people killed by the police indicates that we must maintain the momentum that we have now, because we've protested before. Here in New York City, we had massive protests for Eric Garner. We all watched him get killed by the police, and then eventually we all went on with our lives. And then the killings continued. We must not allow ourselves to revert back to an equilibrium, a status quo where racism is tolerated in any fashion, anywhere in the country. We can't say to ourselves, well, that's Alabama, you know how the people are there. Or if you're black and you don't want to get killed, maybe you don't want to live in Louisville or Tulsa or Texas. There should be no place in this country where we view as more or less likely for a black person to be killed, because it should never be seen as acceptable anywhere. I'll admit that I used to have thoughts like this, as if one killing was more or less racist, or the circumstances surrounding the incident made the killing better or worse. But they're all the same because they all end with someone dead. There are no grades of this. I think when I used to look at each incident, I would try to figure out why the police officer killed the person. And I would try to believe their side of the story, because it didn't actually occur to me that the officer was trained to use excessive force and then did it knowing they could hide behind the immunity their badge gave them. The warrior-style training and culture within the profession must be strongly tempered with compassion, intelligence, and grace. No one, including me, wants the job of police officers to become more difficult or dangerous. I have a tremendous amount of respect for law enforcement, having seen the incredible change in the city from when I was growing up in the late 70s and early 80s to now, when I feel much safer on the subways and throughout New York City. All of my personal interactions with the NYPD have been professional and well handled, and I do not owe that solely to white privilege or luck. At the same time, when I see a police SUV plow into a crowd of demonstrators or peaceful protesters getting hit by batons, I know there is still work to be done. I hope that I can see true progress in my lifetime, and I will always work toward it. The progress that we are making right now might be the only blessing that we can get from the pandemic, because right now we have no distractions. There are no sports, there are no movie theaters, no concerts, and unfortunately, many of us have lost our jobs. So we don't have anything to divert our focus, and we shouldn't allow ourselves to ever return to a routine where these crimes are ignored. We must now all face the horror that we have allowed to exist through our own apathy, and we must maintain this outrage for the rest of our lives. Otherwise, we ourselves are also partly to blame. Number 2, we need a universal surrender procedure. In many of the instances which led to black people getting killed, there is a period of time before the arrest where the suspect is not secured by the officer, and then the officer uses lethal force. If a suspect had the option to assume a universal surrender position, then the officer would be able to safely and easily secure the suspect, and the fear and danger could be alleviated on both sides. Does a wrongfully accused person really want to subvert themselves into a position to allow for an easy arrest? Definitely not. But they definitely don't want to be killed or maimed either. And my goal with this suggestion is to eliminate the worst case scenarios from ever happening. It is to avoid playing a lethal version of Simon Says, where officers are telling a person to do 7 things at the same time while they are flustered with guns possibly being drawn. If we can disarm these scenarios and save even one life, I would be happy. If it had existed in either the Garner or Floyd cases, hopefully both of these men would still be alive. And if either were still killed, then the prosecution of those murders would be even more legally simple, because the legal complement to my suggestion of the universal surrender position is that any undue harm which would come to a person in that position would be automatically prosecuted without qualified immunity being in play. I know that there is a bill currently being developed which would eliminate or strongly challenge qualified immunity, among other reforms, in the current U.S. Congress. But until that is passed, then the universal surrender position might be a measure that could save lives until more complete reform is adopted. In the cases of both Garner and Floyd, the men were begging for their lives and were still killed. In both cases, the police clearly had the upper hand. They had the numbers, the weapons, and the position. Yet somehow they never relented their attack. I'm proposing the universal surrender position so that struggles like these never occur, and thus cannot escalate. And if they did, they would be even easier to prosecute than Floyd's case should be. Number 3, hate is hate. No form of it is less dangerous than another. It's important to remember that racism is a subdivision of hate, but you can't say racism is bad and still hate gay people or Muslims or any other type of person. It all comes from the same place. If scientists invented a teleporter and transported all of the white supremacists to another planet where there were no black people, they would eventually start killing each other for some other reason. Maybe hair color or height or what part of the planet they lived on. Hate is hate. Make no mistake about that. Unfortunately, we've become very tolerant of hate because we're constantly exposed to it, especially online. I don't have to tell you about comment sections. I think you all know what I'm talking about. But we haven't done enough to stop it. Never stop speaking out against it. If a troll writes a hateful thing towards someone, come to their defense so we can improve the culture and environment for everyone. Dollars are votes too. Pay attention to the companies that you support, because financial pressure is a powerful tool for progress. Personally, I'm going to find out which companies support Trump and who are the biggest ad buyers on Fox News so I can help defund both of them. Something I find particularly troubling is how nothing is being done about white supremacy cells. Their hatred is a threat to all people, and it seems we're afraid to address it, or the current government is too tolerant or complicit with them. I personally feel that the Republican Party shouldn't exist anymore in its current form, and that any current member with a shred of decency or professionalism would leave the party or seek to truly reform it. We need to vote out every single Republican possible in the coming election so that we can send a message that lying, incompetence, corruption, and tyranny are not things that Americans are willing to stand for. I think that if the Republicans had any class, that they wouldn't allow Trump to run again. Their focus on maintaining power at any cost has destroyed any legitimacy that they have. Their tactics are criminal to the point where their platform is completely undermined by their methods. And this is coming from a person that believes in some principles on both sides, but realizes that it is impossible in this environment to be a centrist, so I'll make the easy choice and go with the side that isn't trying to destroy true American values. I encourage all politicians and corporations to get on the right side of history now. I encourage all Americans to make it clear that they must. This isn't a movie or TV show that we're watching, even though we seem to be getting closer to Idiocracy or The Handmaid's Tale with each passing moment. And we all should have done more before we got to this point, because Trump has been corrupt from the first day he came into office. I love what America is supposed to be, but we have to admit that we have become a global embarrassment, and we have to correct that. Any vote for Trump is a vote for hate and tyranny. I encourage everyone to vote so that he not only loses, but suffers the worst landslide loss in the history of the country, especially in the popular vote. So those are my 3 points. Number 1, we must maintain our outrage at all racial injustice and continue the pressure which will lead to true reform. Number 2, we must reform the culture, training, and methods of law enforcement to eliminate the worst-case scenarios. And number 3, we must speak out openly against all forms of hate and further a civil and tolerant environment in this country through voting, activism, and courage. Thank you very much for your time. I couldn't just talk about pop culture without letting everyone know how I felt and when there were clearly more important things to discuss. Stay safe and strong.